the heart of this nation, under skies so blue,
there's a spirit that's stirring, values strong and true.
from the mountains to the prairies, from the cities to the sea, we stand for liberty, for faith and family. We're diving deep into the heart of what we believe.
Okay, let's jump right in. Welcome to another deep dive. Today, we're really zeroing in on a specific moment. It was Monday, June 9th, 2025. And this date, well, according to one particular source we're looking at, it really seems to highlight a stark contrast in how protests were handled in two major U.S. cities. The source itself. It's an article from Red State titled, "This is the Way, NYPD Busts Trump Tower Protesters." So our mission today is to unpack this article's perspective, understand the contrast it presents, pull out its key arguments, so you can quickly grasp its take.
Yeah, and it's interesting how the source immediately sets up that contrast. Los Angeles versus New York City, polar opposites, really, on this specific day, based on how it describes the handling of demonstrations. Uses some pretty strong language, too.
Definitely. Okay, so let's start where the article starts, New York City, specifically Trump Tower. And the event it describes there involves pro-illegal immigrant protesters, that's the term used, who apparently sat down inside the lobby.
Right, seated in the lobby. And the source really makes a point about the NYPD's response. It says they descended on them with amazing celerity. Celerity, quite a word for speed.
Yes, speed. And it notes a mass arrest happened pretty quickly after. That speed seems crucial to the source's point.
It really does. And the article, it seems to enjoy this specific detail about the process, right? The loudspeaker warning given to the protesters.
Ah, yes.
It gives the core message, something like, "Since you have refused to leave the premises, you are now subject to arrest." And then it adds the bit about,
if you do not accompany the arresting officer voluntarily, or if you resist arrest, you may be charged with additional crimes.
Exactly. So the source presents this warning as, part of a very clear, very ordered, almost procedural response.
Structured. Formal.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Highlighting that detail seems to emphasize a kind of legalistic, by-the-book approach was taken there.
Okay, so then the article pivots. Hard. It talks about the stark contrast, turning its focus to Southern California and describing what it sees happening there on the same day.
And the language, like you said, gets pretty intense here.
Yeah, it does. The source calls it ongoing riots and, yes, insurrection. Strong words.
Very strong.
It even mentions this idea that history might be made, potentially involving arrests of local or state officials.
For allegedly interfering with federal law enforcement, yeah. So the source is painting a picture of significant unrest and official conflict there.
So it's not just saying, oh, there were protests here and protests there.
Not at all. It's drawing a very sharp line about the nature of the events. The author says, okay, the Trump Tower thing was a protest, but totally different from LA. How it describes the New York protesters, yes, breaking the law, trespassing, interfering, but, and this is a direct quote or close paraphrase, they weren't attacking cops, throwing rocks, setting fires, or even waving Mexican flags.
It's passively resisting.
They just sat on the floor until arrested. That's the image presented.
Okay. And then the contrast with LA.
Well, that's where the source lists the actions it attributes to the participants there. Attacking police, throwing rocks, setting fires, portraying a scene that's much more violent, much more destructive in its view.
Right. And these descriptions, they really build towards the source's main argument, which seems to be all about the difference in the official response.
Exactly.
It makes the point very clearly that the New York police responded quickly before anything had the chance to get out of control. Speed and decisiveness.
And this is where the source really gets critical of Los Angeles. It describes the LA response as, well, deliberate but slow. And ultimately, in the author's opinion, completely ineffective.
It uses some pretty pointed language, doesn't it?
It does. It says something like, it seemed Mayor Bass convened a focus group and took several days before deciding that the best course of action was nothing.
Wow. Okay, so that clearly suggests the source sees a major lack of decisive action in LA.
Definitely. And that ties right into the next big theme the source hits on, consequences.
Ah, yes, consequences.
According to the article, the New York protesters, they broke the law trespassing at minimum and bang, immediate consequences.
They got arrested, likely facing charges, misdemeanors probably.
Right. There was a direct outcome for the action. But then the source pivots back to LA.
Connects the lack of consequences there.
Exactly. This is, I think, a core part of the source's argument. It claims that the lack of consequences for past issues in LA, and it lists things like unchecked urban camping, mass shoplifting, and more, that this history is why the situation described on June 9th unfolded as it did.
So a pattern of inaction in the source's view.
Yeah, it argues local and state authorities there seem to just shrug it all off, implying this happened repeatedly, except it throws in for very specific, maybe high-profile things like when the odd Chinese premier was dropping by for a visit.
An interesting detail to include. So for this source, the perceived lack of accountability, past and present,
is the reason why, in its view, the people involved in the LA events it calls riots and insurrection are clearly not worried about consequences.
because they haven't faced them before, the argument goes.
That seems to be the implication. And the author adds that these same authorities are apparently actively resisting federal efforts to step in and fix it.
So it's painting a narrative of, like, past leniency leading directly to current chaos, coupled with resistance to external help.
That's a fair summary of the narrative presented in the article, yes.
Okay, so bringing it together, the source's overall feeling seems to be maybe some hope for New York because of that swift response.
Right, the decisive action and consequences.
But it raises really serious questions from its perspective about what's happening in Southern California.
And we should probably mention this clearly as we're relaying what's in the source.
Yes.
It does weave in specific political claims to support its points.
It does. For instance, there's a statement that President Trump's policies had virtually stopped illegal immigration.
And it refers to radical left's lies. Right. So, again, just so everyone listening is clear, we're presenting what the source says. We're showing you the arguments it makes without us taking a side on those particular political claims.
Absolutely. Our goal is for you to understand the perspective of this article. So as you think about this, consider how the source built its case. Starts with NYC, the quick response, the arrests, presents LA as the stark contrast, and then really connects that difference to the speed of response and maybe most importantly, the idea of consequences applied in one place, allegedly absent in the other. It uses this one day to make a bigger point.
Yeah, it's a focused argument using that contrast. So if we were to synthesize the core arguments from this specific source, the author draws a very clear line between New York and Los Angeles on June 9th regarding protest management. They praise the NYC response, in their view, attributing it to speed and clear consequences for breaking the law. And then they frame the LA situation as chaotic, linking it directly to what they see as a history of weak enforcement and a lack of consequences for other issues beforehand.
A very distinct perspective laid out. Well, thank you for joining us for this deep dive into that Red State article's viewpoint.
And maybe a final thought for you to consider, sticking just to the themes in this source. This article really hammers home the idea that swift, clear consequences are vital for managing public order, especially during demonstrations. So thinking about the kind of contrast it presents, how might different interpretations of that link between protest, law-breaking, and the certainty of consequences shape public discussion? And maybe even policy responses in different cities or states?
Something to definitely keep thinking about. We encourage you to keep exploring these ideas using the source material we've unpacked today as perhaps one reference point.
In the heart of this nation, under skies so blue, there's a spirit that's stirring, values strong and true. From the mountains to the prairies, from the cities to the sea, we stand for liberty, for faith and family. We're diving deep into